Oh, 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 oh. What's going on? This is Steel Storm 22 back with another video. So, like I said yesterday, I'm going to be finishing up. Hopefully, I finish up. This is going to be part two of the icon, legend, and pop soul singer Prince. So, this is going to be part two. And I did the part one yesterday, so I figured I'd do part two. So, furthermore, let's get right on to it.
When Prince went on tour, it made everyone happy, including himself. He was touched by angels on stage. He filled huge stadiums, such as the Love Sexy Tour in 1988. And then, when the music ended, the demons returned. The other Prince emerged, cold, prickly, setting himself apart.
We got to Paris Friday night. It's Good Friday. We go to the clubs, and sure enough, they're dead. There's just no action. So about 2 a.m, we're sitting in a club in a VIP, and worse, you're in a roped VIP section, of course. So not only is the club dead, but you're dead within the dead. So it's this like drainingly boring situation. And he turns and says, well, you got to admit, it's better than sitting home.
He didn't drink very much. I think he had like a little brandy. Sometimes he'd like a little brandy, but I didn't really see him drink it. He'd probably just sip it every now and then. And he literally would just sit there. And we're like dancing to the music, we're trying to not, because the club's like the music's going, and he would just be sat there. And we'd spend the night like that in the club.
Prince lived for the stage. He couldn't stop, playing stadium shows, then smaller gigs late into the night, pulling in the crowd.
And so we're there, and he starts playing Purple Rain, and everyone's crying. I love that song, we're all going mental.
Don't you sing?
And then suddenly he turns around and he says, don't you sing? So I turn around thinking, oh, he's talking to someone else. And I'm like, I just couldn't even speak. I was like, it was just. We've heard that song how many times? Like 100 times, right? Could I remember the whole lyric? I was so nervous. All I could remember was the first line. So what I did was I held the note really long because I couldn't remember the rest of the words because I was scared.
That's hard. When you performing, you gotta know all the words. That right there is tough. But that's the life of being a celebrity and a song, singer, rapper, musician. Just think about it.
Just my imagination. Imagination. Ooh, come on, y'all. Come on. Just my imagination.
Unless he was on stage, there was a barrier between Prince and other people. Very few were allowed in. Photographer Terry Giderson glimpsed the real Prince on tour with him in 1993. Her photographs reveal the unhappiness and isolation others did not see.
Twice, I think it was, that he invited me into his dressing room. The first time was when I made these photos of him in the mirror with all of his makeup, and it was just great. Now, we were in Barcelona. I wasn't familiar with the Sagrada Familia Cathedral at the time, but we pull up to this massive, amazing looking place, and the only light on it is coming from the street light. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning, and this was August, so it was that like pre-dawn light that you could just start to see the spires of the cathedral separating from the background. I'm looking at this light, I'm like, oh God, it's dark. And he says, will your flashlight up the church? I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. And I shot about a roll, half a roll, whatever. I just watched him, and I just thought, God, this must be such a lonely life for him. I can't imagine a life like that. He looked lonely to me.
That year, when he returned from tour, Prince upped the conflict with Warner Brothers, the record label who nurtured him from the beginning. Prince claimed Warner Brothers held him back as an artist.
Warner's was always trying to slow him down and milk whatever they could out of the current project. They just felt that left to his own devices, he would oversaturate the market. Now, from a business standpoint, that was a very legitimate position. I agreed with them. From a creative standpoint, it frustrated him terribly.
Prince wrote, "If I can't do what I want to do, what am I?"
When I ran into him once and he was wearing slave on his cheek, and I just laughed and said, "You're the only slave that owns the plantation."
On CNN, Prince said he was being deliberately confrontational.
Once I started writing slave on my face, I pretty much knew the outcome. I mean, you have to understand that that word on one's face pretty much changes the dynamic of any meeting that you're in when they see it.
Yeah, and how did people react to you when they did see it?
Well, the record company didn't really say too much. They just kind of... All right, what's the business at hand today? And that was it.
In 1996, after 3 years of wrangling, Warner Brothers released Prince from his contract.
He wrote Slave for a reason, because he was getting treated as a slave. That's what happens when you sign to a label, a record deal. You are their slave. Regardless of how good you are or how talented your voice is, they'll making sure that you go through the game. Like, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to pay, it's just, you're not free. I know it's the same. It's true. I mean, everybody is a slave nowadays. Music, like actors and actresses, musicians, freaking entertainers, like talk show hosts. Like, think about it. You look around, you see those people on TV. They got a deal, but they signed their souls away. So they released Prince. Well, Prince, it's the best thing that Prince needed in his life, to be released. Like what he said, if he can't sing, or he can't do what he can do, like, what is he? So once you're in a label, man, like, you ain't free. They own you. They own everything you do. So once you sign a label or sign a record deal, everything that you do, they own it. They control it. But hey, riding slave on his cheek pretty much said the definitely truth about Prince and how he was treated and how he wasn't, able to do what he wanted to do. He can't say what he want to say.
Can't believe he's gone. And right at a time in his career when he could be able to just sit back and let the money roll in. It just doesn't make any commercial sense. He was like a son to me. I was like a dad to him. A number of times I helped him. He's literally going to have to tour for the rest of his life just to pay for this. It will kill him.
We're on the verge of the period where he starts calling himself by a symbol, and then the artist formerly known as Prince. he goes farther and farther off in this tree limb of self-definition till he almost falls off. And in the 90s, his sales do decline as he's going through all of these identity crises. And I use the word crisis because nobody would have voluntarily done that to themselves in public. Who wants to say, I'm now going to become a symbol? And a symbol you can hardly print. I mean, who could do that?
Prince claimed leaving Warner's was an emancipation. He agreed to talk again to Rolling Stone to promote his newfound freedom.
I do what feels good in the moment. I'm not on the schedule, and I don't have any sort of contractual ties. I don't know in history any musicians that have been self-sufficient like this.
Do you ever feel like retiring?
I never felt like I had a job. Does that make sense? So these words, job, retire.
I mean, that's the...
That was that was like really personal because Prince grew up in a dysfunctional environment. Like his parents were never there for him. His father was always hard on him, and he pretty much, his mother was just a lady who just went from a man to another man, left her husband and went to another man, and Prince had to survive on his own, and he did it on his own, and he still feel like what more does he have? Like he pretty much grew up as a loner. Nobody was there for him. His father wouldn't take him back. He called his sister and he asked her father, and he said no, and he was crying. That's a lot of trauma for a kid that goes to that lifestyle. That's a lot of trauma. You like 12 or 10, your own parents are like breaking apart, divorce, your own father being hard on you, being jealous of you, selfish because you're doing something else that's better than what he's doing, and your mother is just the weakling, not even standing up, being there for her own son, while he's dressing up scoutless, dressing all heterosexual, wearing all these freaking thongs, these Spanxes, like the way that he's performing, like that right there, it's really challenging on how Prince carried himself in his life and his career. But like he said, he still felt hurt. He still felt like he's still struggling. He still felt like he didn't have anybody else but himself. I mean, it's like he said, his father didn't say he didn't love him back, and they never hugged, and he said they bumped heads, and pretty soon later, Prince rather just, like he said, be alone, which he has been. But continue on.
That's the only thing he had. He never worked a job in his life. He didn't have anything else but music.
With fewer recording commitments and less pressure from Warner's, there was room for Prince to let someone in. In 1996, he married 22-year-old Maite Garcia, a singer and dancer with his band.
I think it was a different period in his life where he had met his true love, and her contribution to all of us is she got him to open up. I think he got to see the sense of what a real life and a marriage and what happiness was about. And she gave us this gift of Prince felt more comfortable and more normal maybe, so he opened up because she encouraged him to open up.
Yet if 37-year-old Prince felt he was finally in control of his life, he was wrong.
I believe Prince could never find love because he didn't know what love felt like.
To heal the pain of his childhood, Prince now said his greatest ambition was to have a child of his own. Two months after Prince married Maite Garcia, she was pregnant. When a scan revealed there was a problem with the pregnancy, Prince refused to accept there was something wrong.
I'd like you to go to a specialist. Your options include having a full chromosome test to see what the problem is, to have a termination, or to go ahead and have the child.
My wife is not seeing a specialist.
You're not allowing me to do my job here. This is bad news. We have to deal with it.
The scan showed the baby had an unusually large head and could be born with serious deformities. Prince insisted the pregnancy must continue, claiming God cured people, not medicine. On October the 16th, 1996, boy Gregory was born with a rare skull defect, Pfeiffer syndrome.
I got the phone call that, the kid was born at severe disabilities and stuff.
Wow.
I don't know if he ever recovered from that, to be honest. He was devastated.
After 7 days, the staff said there was nothing more they could do. On October the 23rd, they switched off the life support. Boy Gregory died a few hours later.
Wow. Wow. Damn. That must have hurt.
He used to say we would have 10 kids together. And I wanted the same. It was my dream to become a mother. So when I found myself pregnant, a couple of months after we got married, we were over the moon about it. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to us.
For me, after that, he wasn't really the same. Didn't really get the phone calls like, come out and hang. It kind of stopped then, around that time. He changed. To me, he changed at that point.
He was very vulnerable and hurt. You know, you got your kid dying. I mean, what do? You know, this kid died.
That takes that changes somebody. Your kid dying, a rare syndrome. That's pretty much what goes on in life nowadays. A lot of people, like, they get pregnant and they see that their kid has a rare disease or a disability and they have to pull the plug. That definitely changes somebody's life. Like you're marrying a woman and she wants to be a mother and she gets pregnant, but there's a problem and the child has a rare disease, a rare disability, and what more they do? Until then, they have to pull the plug and child died, and that definitely changes somebody's life a lot. So Prince definitely took this personal, knowing the fact that his kid is gone.
You know, I mean, that's like, I mean, where does that leave you? It's like you're empty. You're empty. There's nothing. You're just a shell.
Prince would not accept the truth. An interview with Oprah Winfrey to celebrate Prince becoming a father was broadcast a month after boy Gregory died. On Oprah, Prince behaved as if nothing was wrong.
He showed me their newly decorated playroom.
And here's my favorite room.
The children's to be, the children's to come,
Yes, ma'am.
the child in you, or just the children?
Oh, the children's, yeah.
And all those rumors about their baby? Well, the artist shared this with us.
It's all good. Never mind what you hear.
Prince was never able to tell his son he loved him, just as his father never told him. Maite's next pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. The strain of the two lost pregnancies broke up the marriage.
Wow.
Prince would never raise a child of his own. A second marriage to charity worker Manuela Testolina also failed. Relationships seemed doomed.
I remember when Kim Basinger had been his significant other for a while, brief while, and had actually come to Minneapolis and was living with him in Minneapolis and holding an office at Paisley Park. Just as suddenly as she appeared, she left, kind of overnight. And that relationship, for whatever reason, only they know, ended abruptly. And he came in my office, as he would often do, and just sat on the desk while we talked about a few things. And I said, "Hey, man, you okay? How do you think I'd be?" Then he walked out. Now, the "are you okay" was compassionate. It was intended as, you want a hug? You know, a brotherly, "You okay, dude?" And the only thing I could get back was a very snide, "How do you think I'd be?"
After his parents died in 2001 and 2002, Prince became a Jehovah's Witness, a religion sharing many beliefs with the Seventh-day Adventism of his childhood.
He didn't get a chance to repair his relationship with his mother and father. And by going back to the church, I feel that he felt that he was making things right.
Prince wanted to be cleansed and purified by religion. And in 2003, he underwent a full baptism in his local Kingdom Hall.
I mean, where does that leave you? It's like you're empty. You're empty. There's nothing. You're just a shell. And then somebody comes along and go like, "Hey, man, look, let me tell you something. Read this under this passage here, you know, or whatever and stuff." And they get them, you know. And then you stick with it because you feel that if you go away from it, that something bad's going to happen to you.
So let me get this right. You've stopped swearing, given up eating meat and drinking alcohol, and are refusing to perform any of your racier songs?
Well, after 4 days, you don't want it anymore. It's like this thing that says, feed me, feed me. When you realize it's not going to get fed, it goes away.
Prince pushed people away all his life, then looked to God for answers.
Even for someone who made records that were thought to be immoral and beyond lusty and were responsible for the advent of the warning labels on records and so on and so on, this was a guy who, from the beginning of the time I knew him, had a very conservative moral streak underneath all of that.
Both angels and demons were crowding around Prince. The escape was always the music. Yet there would only be a handful more great public performances when Prince would rock the world. In 2004, he guested last minute at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
George Harrison is posthumously inducted. A couple of his bandmates from the Traveling Wilburys, Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty, starred While My Guitar Gently Weeps, his Beatles classic. And then, at around minute 3, in storms Prince, who's only there because he's being inducted. And he does this guitar solo in which he just takes the song to another level. Talk about stealing the show. I mean, he just doesn't get the spotlight on him. He just consumes the whole thing. And for this delicious, delirious minute 20 seconds, he owns the music world. It's one of the greatest solo performances ever, and he knows it because at the end he throws his guitar up in the air and he storms off stage as if to say, right, I've done what I came to do, beat that.
After that, Prince was seen less and less in public. He disappeared from view. There was little going on now at Paisley Park, just Prince alone writing music and storing it away in a vault.
So you're living essentially false, except when you go musically. And that's why you start to get into a place where if I just stay in the music world, if I just stay in my music, in my thoughts, then I will be okay. It will save me.
It was just another way of putting up walls between him and everyone else. He was able to withdraw inside, oftentimes not being seen for long periods of time.
No one went back to the root and said, okay, here's how we fix that. It just never got done. If you start building walls, those walls inevitably have to become larger. And then suddenly you realize you're walled in. So you yourself can't get on the other side of that wall. Sure, you're keeping people outside. Sure, you're keeping control over them because you have a big wall. But you're suddenly now isolated behind that wall.
In January 2013, 54-year-old Prince came on stage during the Grammy Awards, his first big public appearance in 6 years. He walked with a stick due to severe hip pain caused by years of dancing.
And why would he have pain? Because he was 5'3" and wore heels for decades. And not only wore heels, but danced on heels. And I mean, even that physical act seems impossible to most of us. How can you even do that?
He pushed himself so hard physically when he was young that I can't imagine that he wasn't suffering some sort of bodily pain. From the speakers, I saw him jump off 30 feet, 20 feet. Every night, just perfect 10s. And if they weren't, you'd never know it. So if he landed wrong and it hurt him, you'd never know it.
I can confirm he had surgery on his hips, and it's what happens when you jump for 40 years onto heels. That's what happens. It's a related injury.
Prince had a secret. His clean living days were over. As his health collapsed, he started taking a variety of powerful medications to deal with the crippling pain. He was becoming hooked on opioids. In his last interview with Rolling Stone, Prince deflected any questions about addiction.
Were you ever self-destructive?
Was I ever self-destructive? Do I look self-destructive?
Prince was ashamed at the end because he had such a reputation for clean living, which was really true. He was vegan. He was ashamed that he was a drug addict. He looked with disdain on those who really lost their careers via drugs.
I mean, that's the irony with his death, is that it was drug related, because there were no drugs going on when I was on that concert.
This is a very tough demon to overcome. And it doesn't make you a wild addict, or anything like that. You get on this treadmill of this stuff, and it's one of the leading killers today in the United States. It's just just what it is.
Somebody says, I can fix your hip. So here, your hip, suddenly you feel better. You're able to perform. It still hurts the hip a couple days later. You take another one. And you're now taking 4 a day. 5 a day. Suddenly, everything else starts to break down. Mind, body, spirit starts to break down because of the heaviness of this narcotic. So then what happens? Now you need it because everything hurts. It hurts to breathe. It hurts to wake up. It hurts to go to sleep.
In January 2016, Prince tried to end the rumors of ill health by announcing he was back in the game with his solo piano and microphone tour.
Maybe this was his way of saying, I'm trying. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to come back. Let me, just do these songs.
This is what I like to do at this time of night. Some of these songs get real emotional for me. Real emotional.
I remember Prince having a full-on band, huge production, and suddenly here he was with just his piano. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen him stripped down like that. And then you think, his father was the one that taught him how to play the piano. So he's gone all the way back to try to recreate that moment.
When I was a boy, I thought I'd never be able to play like my dad. And boy, he never missed an opportunity to let me know about it.
At 57, the same old demons were still haunting Prince, talking about his father, singing about his mother.
Sometimes, like a motherless child.
Prince was performing Motherless Child in his later years.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Clearly, this all went to his background and his issues with his mother and father.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
It was so apparent to me that his life had come full circle. I saw it, just stripping it down. To me, he was literally stripping everything away, preparing himself to go.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. No way from home.
Prince launched the tour in the safety of Paisley Park, then took it on the road just like the old days. But then things started to go wrong. On April the 14th, Prince flew home from 2 shows in Atlanta.
990 Chicago Center, Center Pilot special to maintain 3000, Molina altimeter is 3012.
Prince passed out and could not be revived. He was with singer Judith Hill and his bodyguard Kirk Johnson.
990 clear for approach to the Quad City Airport. Was it a male or female passenger?
One male passenger, jet 990.
B990 CFR will be waiting. They want you to go to the on the west end of North Ramp.
At 1:18 a.m., Prince's private jet made an emergency landing in Moline, Illinois, just 48 minutes by air from Minneapolis. Prince's medical issues, clearly some kind of overdose, were so acute they couldn't wait. On Prince's person, medics found fentanyl, a painkiller, lidocaine, a local anesthetic, and U-4770, a synthetic drug 8 times more powerful than morphine. Prince pulled through, just. Later, it became clear the pills he carried with him were prescribed to someone else. They were mislabeled as being weaker than they really were. Prince was in denial and others were colluding.
The bigger you become, the more people say yes to you. And I've kind of nicknamed it death by yes. The person who stands up to you and says no is the person who cares the most.
I remember hearing voices from afar and saying to myself, Follow the voices. Follow the voices. Get back in your body.
It was a near-death experience for Prince, and it was covered up.
Then I heard about the emergency landing of the plane on the Friday night and was concerned and got in touch with someone at Paisley whom I knew and was assured that he was in fact okay, that he was back in Minneapolis, that it had been a scare, but he was okay. But it was almost like I was hearing a press release. It wasn't, even though I knew this person, there was something else going on that I could tell.
2 days later, Prince insisted a late-night performance at Paisley Park must go ahead, yet he seemed fragile.
This is the first thing my dad taught me how to play.
Something really was off about that night. You know, a lot of us weren't really kind of dancing. It was just kind of a mediocre type mood in a way, where I remember when he showed us the piano and he started playing chopsticks. Yeah, something kind of like clicked in me, like, you know, am I seeing Prince play for the last time?
And then Prince said something his fans would never forget.
Save your prayers for a couple of days. I'm here and I'm okay.
Despite nearly dying on the plane, in the days following, Prince was still using medication. On Wednesday, April the 19th, witnesses saw Prince, dressed in black, pacing a parking lot outside a pharmacy in a mall near his home. He looked worried and upset. It was the last time he was seen alive. Early the following morning, Thursday, April the 21st, there was a surprise visitor to Paisley Park. Andrew Cornfield, a young medical student. He was sent by his father, an addiction specialist. Worried by Prince's drug use, he asked his son to look in on Prince.
Hello? Hi there. Yeah. Hey, you want to see a dress here? Yeah, we need an ambulance right now. Okay. We have someone who is unconscious. Okay, what's the address? Prince's house? Okay, does anybody know the address? Is there any mail around that you could look at? Yeah, okay, hold on. Your cell phone's not going to tell me where you're at, so I need you to find me an address. Yeah, we have, okay, get me the address, please. So the person is dead here.
Emergency services in Minneapolis arrived on the scene at 9:43 a.m. At 10:07 a.m., Prince Rogers Nelson was pronounced dead.
Good evening, music fans everywhere are reacting to the stunning loss of pop superstar Prince, one of music's most unique and dynamic performers who gave us such hits as Purple Rain and Little Red Corvette.
I just can't believe it's true. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe he's gone.
On June the 2nd, 2016, the autopsy report was published. Prince died of a fentanyl overdose, a synthetic morphine 50 times stronger than heroin.
There was no one in the immediate arena that could say, this stops right now. And so you end up what you end up with. Tragic and awful and surprising and hurtful, and everybody's at a loss to truly explain it.
The toughest thing for me to hear was that he died alone in an elevator after having an incident on an airplane. that told me that there were too many yeses and not enough no's at the expense of somebody's life. I'm not blaming someone for his death by any means. What you do to yourself. But it told me that there were too many yeses.
I'm screaming in my car. Prince! Screaming at the top of my voice. What? Why? What? Because I couldn't understand it. I couldn't get past it. You know? It was just a shock. I just couldn't believe it.
So looking down the road, is there an end point?
It's just so nice to know that there is someone and someplace else. And if we're wrong, then I'm wrong. And there is nothing. A big deal. But the whole life I just spent, I at least had some reason to spend it.
Prince spent his entire adult life making music, yet the music could not save him.
I'm not sure that having helped make Prince famous and help make Prince achieve his dreams was ultimately what he needed. And all I had done is introduce him to a nice girl, and he had had a couple of children and gone to work at the factory and grew up as an old man sitting on his rocking chair, never famous. I think perhaps maybe I would have been more proud of that.
I believe I can say for sure that Prince was the loneliest person I ever met in my life.
We used to call him the lonely guy because we didn't want him to be lonely. He had all his friends here. We are the people that loved him. We are the ones that loved him. He didn't have nothing. He had nothing, and we loved him. So, God. Somebody should have been with him. He should have never been alone, ever. And I'm still not over it. It's very painful. Not over it. As you can see, I'm just not over it.
Well, stay right there. Our tribute to the musical legend continues here on Channel 5. Prince stars in the 80s classic Purple Rain next.
Potato.
Well, there you have it. There you have it right there. There you have it. And here's my thoughts on the whole documentary. Emotional, painful, and severely. It was just sad seeing that Prince was still suffering. He was still suffering like he had nobody else. Even though his father did teach him how to play, but his father didn't love him. His mother wasn't always there to actually be there, actually comfort him. But she was the weak one. And Prince felt like both of his parents deceived him. They deceived him. And that takes a lot on someone when they're as a child. His mom introduced him to pornography, and that's what I saw in the documentary. And his own father wouldn't take him back when he needed him. He needed his family. He needed his parents, but they weren't there. So, only thing he had was music, but it still didn't save him. It still didn't make him feel better. I mean, this was like, and I'm gonna do this, then people should understand my pain, understand what I'm dealing with, understand that I'm the way I am because I don't know anything about love. I don't know anything about happiness. I didn't know anything about like talking to a lot of people. I'm always alone. And Prince grew up as a loner. He had to work hard to achieve his goal and his dreams, and it was accomplished. But him playing those songs, Purple Rain and Chopsticks, brought back to the realization of his parents deceived him. Man, the crazy thing about it, he was on medications too. He was on painkillers, fentanyl, and that's what I mean. Like that's why I'd be saying and thinking like drugs gotta get off. They gotta be like gone. That's the main reason why people are dying nowadays because of these dang drugs. Fentanyl killed a lot of people. And you know who's selling these. But you know, they got business. They got ways to expand. If they're going to sell some dangerous drugs to people, then we all know who's the bad one. But continue on with the whole documentary. Prince nearly died on that plane. And he was rushed to the hospital and he had to regain what he heard and what happened. But until then, it was just hard for him to knowing the fact that he was still fighting demons. He still had a lot of trauma onto him, and the fact of the matter is that he lost his son. The marriage was broken up, and Prince could never raise the child. It was tough for him. And matter is, he had to show people that what he did and what he brought and what he can do. That's why when he was signing to record labels, he figured that they can actually see his work, see what his voice was, and see his creativity and see what he brought. And that's what he did. But once he was signed to a label, he couldn't say or do what he wanted to do. But then they released him because they only wanted to control him. They wanted to control his narrative. That's what they wanted him to do. And he felt, nope, enough is enough. I'm gonna do what I want to do, alone, solo. So after they released him, he pretty much stopped performing and stopped being on TV, and he stopped being in interviews. The last interview he had was Rolling Stone back in 2013, I think. But it was still more that Prince was dealing with, because he pretty much was alone at the time. He was always alone. He didn't had anybody. Even though he was married, but the marriage broke up because the child died of a rare disease, and the wife had a miscarriage, and the marriage was broken up. Years and years of trying to, regain his upper senses of trying to perform. Still, he was still dealing with demons. He was still dealing with a lot. And the sad thing about it, he still felt that it wasn't enough for him. And the most sad thing is he died alone. He died alone. Nobody was there but him. He died alone in that elevator shaft. And one of the young men found him. This was sad. This was a sad documentary, man. This was one sad documentary. The crazy thing about it, he died alone. He was alone at the time. He died alone. That whole fortress that was built in Minneapolis, which he was from and where he was born at, he died alone. He died alone. That took a lot out of everybody. That must have meant he was still in pain. He was still suffering from the demons. He was still suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He was still suffering. And it was like he couldn't deal with it anymore. He died of an overdose, drug overdose, fentanyl. A 57-year-old icon legend Prince dying alone. He died alone by himself. Nobody was there but him. I know he had fans. He had lots of fans. I know they loved him. They loved everything about his music. And this day forward on, people are still not over the fact that he died alone in his house, in that fortress of a mansion. He died alone in an elevator shaft. Nobody there. No friends. No wife. Both parents deceased. Sister nowhere to be found. He died by himself, alone, because he was a loner at the time. He didn't know what love is. He didn't even had good parents, even though his father was a religious man, and his father did teach him how to play the piano, but still, his father was always hard on him, and he kept pushing him away, because once Prince started doing things differently and better, his father ended up becoming jealous. It's like, you're supposed to be glad that your son is achieving his dream, playing, like doing music, because either way, he stayed in the documentary. He said he was short, and he always wore high heels, and he still felt like there was a reason for him, because he wasn't tall. He was short. I mean, and people may not be happy with the height that they're in, but it's their life. I'm not saying it's nothing wrong with that because I was short too. I was short. I couldn't ride. I couldn't get on rides because of my height. I'm supposed to be this tall, and I couldn't do it because I was short. And that meant I cried because I wasn't tall enough. And I still feel that. Don't forget the fact that I was short too. But then I grew into a much taller size, and hey, I'm blessed and I'm grateful that hey, this is how I came as 6'3", because I can still remember the fact that I was short. Everybody has a certain height and they can't deal with that height, but they have to wear high boots, high shoes, high heels, like Marie said, Prince was short, so he had to wear high heels to become himself tall because he wasn't tall. He was short. And it's crazy that he did all those dance moves in high heels because that's some serious risk right there to actually do them splits and jump off the stage in high heels. Like, yo, man, I don't know if I've seen anybody that can do that can jump from one stage to another in high heels. Like that right there is a risk. You can actually break a hip, break an ankle, or worse, tore an ACL or break a leg. Still, man, Prince tried basketball, but it wasn't his dream because he was short. But still, Prince did his job. Prince lived a tough life. He lived a very, really tough life as a kid, much as a loner, because he was always lonely, always alone. And he was just suffering. Hold on. Okay. Anywho, yeah. So Stalking Mary Man was sad, and it was tough to actually see the fact that he died alone, man. He died alone. But to this day forward, he will always be remembered as the lonely, lonely boy. That's what they called him, because he was always alone. And the thing is, he was never used to talking. He never was used to actually speaking up or being open because he didn't even know how to even speak. And the craziest thing is, his father never actually told that he loved him. Even though how can you raise a child, but your own parents own father didn't love you. But either way, that's what it is nowadays. But until this day forward on, Prince will always be remembered rest in peace to the legend, pop musician Prince, and he will definitely be always remembered, and that he lived a tough life, and he lived a very, very difficult position, especially in music. But it was still said that he died alone in that cold, in that fortress, and he died in the elevator. He died in 2016. It's been nearly nearly 5 or 6 years since his death. But hey, at least he's resting in peace. And I'm going to say he died peacefully. I'm not going to say brutally, but he died peacefully. At least he can put all that to rest in heaven. But there you have it for the documentary of Prince. So this is me about to end this right now, and I'll be doing more really soon. I'll be doing more documentaries about some of the famous icons, celebrities, musicians, and be sure to tune in. So, this is me signing out, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.